What we do with the Price Predictor Index is something that no one else seems to do in residential real estate, because most of the information is about median prices and whether they've moved up or down in the last 12 months. What we do is we chart sales volumes, because we think that an upward movement in the number of houses that are selling in an area is a precursor to price growth. Basically, we chart increasing demand by charting quarter by quarter how many sales are happening. We do it for every town and suburb in Australia every 3 months, and by doing that we start to determine the patterns ahead of the price growth. So basically we're looking for locations where the number of sales are rising, therefore demand is rising, and therefore prices will rise in the short term.
Now, what does it tell us about the general sort of lay of the land for these supercharged suburbs and across the country? And how do you break them down to understand how each of them are working?
Well, I think each of the towns or suburbs that are on our top 50 list of the supercharged suburbs, they say something about the market, the broader market in which they sit. Where there are a number of suburbs, for example, in certain sections of the Perth market, which is a market that's actually moving into a recovery phase after 4 years of downturn. There are a number of suburbs in certain parts of the Adelaide market, which I think is a very underrated market, and one in which we're going to see stronger price growth moving forward. There's also a number of towns and locations in some of the stronger regional areas, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria. That's where we're seeing the real uplift in markets. Everybody knows that there's a general downturn in the two biggest cities, Melbourne and Sydney. But what we are seeing is uplift, still very strong uplift in Hobart and Tasmania, but particularly in regional areas. That's where the strongest growth markets are happening now in terms of price growth and sales activity. And many of them are in regional Victoria, close to Melbourne, and regional New South Wales, particularly around Newcastle and the Hunter region.
Right, so in this market where it is slowing a bit in some areas, is that a good time to be hotspotting?
Well, for certain types of buyers it is. What we're seeing in the two biggest cities is, while the generalised data, the research houses tend to pump out a single figure to describe what's happening in a city as big as Sydney, a city with over 700 suburbs, but prices are generally not falling in all parts of the Sydney market. The areas on the fringes where first home buyers are active we're still seeing very strong prices in those markets. Right now, in fact, first home buyers are more active across Australia than any time in the last 6 years, and the markets, rather ironically perhaps, where they're most active are in Sydney and in Melbourne, partly because there are grants available and also stamp duty concessions. So on the fringes of the two biggest cities, we're still seeing very active markets and prices holding up very strongly because of the first home buyer activity.
So if we can look at this now with your wisdom around the country, can we start to break down some of these top supercharged areas for people at home to be watching?
Well, yeah, there are suburbs in Perth, for example, the Stirling local government area, which is a little bit north of the Perth CBD, and the Melville local government area, which is a little bit south of the Perth CBD. These are sort of middle market areas. Some of them are upmarket areas. And these are the markets that are leading the recovery in the Perth market. And one of the things that stands out for us is that while generally speaking we haven't seen much price uplift in Perth, the $1 million suburbs are actually rising very strongly. In the last 12 months, many of the suburbs of Perth which have median prices above $1 million have actually had double-digit growth in their median prices in the last 12 months. And that's a significant thing, because what we find is that upcycles usually begin at the top end of the market. We saw that in Sydney, we saw that in Melbourne, and it starts in the swanky upmarket suburbs, and it ripples out from there over time. Mm-hmm. So we think that the fact that in Perth we're seeing uplift in the top end, and suburbs on the list like Bicton, for example, where the median price is above $1 million, the fact that those suburbs are showing price growth is the beginning of an upcycle in Perth, and we're actually seeing the same thing happening in Adelaide as well.
Now, for hotspotters, what are you typically recommending? Can you give us an example of a suburb and how long you'd be needing to hold for to start seeing some growth and to realise a profit?
Well, one of the characteristics of this particular report, the Price Predictor Index, is that It's charting locations where we're going to see price growth in the short term. Most of our reports, we have top 5 hotspots reports for all the capital cities and some of the regional areas. They're taking a more of a medium to long term view, but this particular report looks at areas where we're going to see uplift in prices in the short term. So anything that's on this this top 50 supercharged suburbs list, for example, is likely to see prices rising from now across the next, say, 12 months. So it's more of a short-term outlook. So we've got, as I mentioned, a number of suburbs in Perth, a number of suburbs in Adelaide. Newcastle and the Hunter region is very prominent on this list. Regional cities like Ballarat and Bendigo also have suburbs very prominent on this list as well.
Now, Terry, where can people go to get a bit more information on this, to get some more of a specific breakdown?
Well, the hotspotting.com.au website is where you find this particular report and the other products that we sell. Primarily the purpose of the website is to tell people the places where prices are going to rise before they rise. That's the central theme of the website. Not much point in telling people where prices have risen in the last 12 months, because that's telling people where they should have bought maybe 1 to 2 years ago.
Hindsight.
So what we try to do is tell people about the price growth ahead of time. And there's this particular report, the Price Predictor Index, can be found on the hotspotting.com.au website.
Well, Terry Ryder, that's the information everybody wants, and it sounds like you've got it. So thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you,
so much
Terry.
for your time.
I'm going to be jumping on hotspotting myself, my friend. Thanks so much.
All the smart people do, mate. Thanks for that.
Good on you.